One of the biggest complaints you'll hear among people who drive Mustang IIs and are looking for performance out of that car is it really doesn't handle that well. It's got an independent front suspension, rack and pinion steering, and then leaf spring rear. And some people are a bit caught off guard that you might say it handles poorly because the Mustang II front end is extremely popular. People used to cut them out of the Mustang IIs in junkyards and put them in all kinds of hot rods. And nowadays, you can buy an aftermarket purpose-built Mustang II style front end to put in just about anything. On the Mustang II itself, it's not so much about the design of the front end that gives it poor performance. It's kind of the execution. So the upper and lower control arms are stamped steel pieces with a lot of flex to them. The ball joints are low quality, also a lot of play. They use a strut rod to locate the lower control arm. The bushings on those were just rubber and didn't last more than a year or two, and then you'd have a bunch of play with the lower control arm. Coil springs and shocks, of course, there are always better options such as coilovers. And the front sway bar was pretty small in diameter. Couple that with the fact that it's a unibody car. It's got a welded-in sort of front subframe, and there's a lot of structure in the rear, but there's nothing that connects the front to the rear other than the floor pans. And especially if your floor pans are rusty, that means there's not a lot of structure to give any sort of rigidity to the car. And so if you go into a corner and you turn the wheel sharply, what's more than likely to happen is that the wheels will turn and the car will continue to go straight. Or if the car does turn, you will get a tremendous amount of body roll, and then the rear end will want to come around on you. And in between, you'll get a lot of flex in the body itself. And so I've got a lot of options in how I can stiffen up the car. And I'm going to show you what I've chosen to do. But first, I'm going to take you under the car and show you what I'm dealing with, or what anybody with a Mustang II is dealing with in terms of the factory structure under the car. And I'll show you how I plan to stiffen that up. So we're underneath of the car in my storage unit, and I just want to show you some of the construction. It's pretty standard for a 70s type car. Let me get the light situated here. It's a subframe or a unibody car. It has a welded on front subframe. So what we're looking at right here in front of me is a box channel steel support that's welded to the bottom of the floor pan, and it extends forward into the engine compartment, and there's one on either side. So there's the other rail over there. And they are reasonably strong. They're in a couple pieces. There's a weld seam right here just aft of the two holes that you see. And the two holes are where the transmission cross member attaches to this structure. So it's a pretty stout structure. The engine mounts attached to this same structure in the engine compartment. The problem you have when you apply a lot of horsepower to a car like this, though, is with the frame rails ending here, there's nothing aft of that to carry a specific load path to the rear suspension other than the floor. And the floor is reasonably strong, but it's never been intended to withstand any sort of a strong loading. It's a leaf spring suspension, so the leaf spring attaches here at the forward mounting point, and then it's got a traditional shackle in the rear, and then we have our 8-inch rear end. Lots of discussion about the 8-inch rear end, whether it's sufficient or what you can do to it and so forth. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I'll come back to it. Here's a long distance shot. You can see the leaf spring over there and the forward end bracket where it attaches. I just wanted to, come to the storage unit and get some shots of what this actually looks like, so that when I show you the component parts that I've got to correct for a lot of the problems of applying loading to a structure like this, it will make more sense. Laid out on my kitchen floor here, I have all the pieces that I'm going to use to stiffen up the body of the car and make it handle and perform a lot better than it would stock. So starting over here, I have a pair of brand new leaf springs. Of course, the ones that are on the car, 40-something, 46 years old at least. These are brand new springs, and they have a better spring rate than the stock spring did. They'll support the car much better than the stock springs did, but they'll also flex and respond the way I'm going to need the rear end too. It's about the best you can get in sticking with a leaf spring rear end. Now, there's going to be a lot of people that say, oh, just mini tub it and 4-link it and whatever, all kinds of stuff like that. But this is a street-driven car, and it's not going to see a racetrack other than under the rarest of circumstances. It's going to be driven on the street primarily. No reason to reinvent the design of the rear end when the leaf springs work fine for what I want to do with the car. But the stock ones are old, they're worn, and these are much, much better. And they were inexpensive as well. I think I paid about 110 bucks each for them. Right here in the middle, these are the subframe connectors. And notice they've got kind of a kink to them because the sort of the pseudo frame rail in the front of the car is a lot further inboard than the spring shackle was in the back of the car. And this is designed to connect those two mounting points on the car. On the front, the subframe has a lot of strength to that structure. It's where the engine mounts are, it's where the suspension for the front end are, it's where the transmission mount is. In the back, where the springs mount, the forward mounting point for the leaf spring, there's a structural member that's part of the body that mounts in there, and it kind of goes inboard and up over the wheel arch into the back of the car. If you ever do decide you want to mini tub one of these cars, you might want to consider leaving that structure and tying into it instead of cutting it out. In my 78 Mustang, my subframe connectors did not have a front piece like this on them. It was just a rectangular steel piece that welded on the bottom of the subframe and the forward end of the car. And then in the back, it had kind of a C shape, just this bottom part piece that welded onto the spring mount, and then the subframe connector welded to the bottom of that. So it would have been about 1.5 inches lower than this one because it would have been down below here and below here. So these mount a lot better. It gives you a couple options in the front. There are 3 mounting holes pre-drilled in it, and it is a channel. So this will slide directly over the subframe in the car, and you can either just drill the holes and bolt it, or you can do a combination of bolting and welding, which is what I'll probably do. At the aft end, the top side has a couple holes pre-drilled in it, and those holes correspond with the holes that hold on the mounting bracket for the forward end of the leaf spring. So all you have to do is take the nuts off, slide this in place, and put the nuts back on, and that's it at the aft end. And once it's connected, it'll directly tie the subframe in the front to the structure in the rear. These are made by a company called Stumpy's Fab Works, and they're made to order, and he does a fantastic job with them. They really, really make a massive difference in the strength and rigidity of this particular car. I got a couple other pieces here. This is sort of a traction bar. There's one for each side, and then a rear sway bar. Now, I say sort of a traction bar because the original style traction bars that you used to be able to buy for these cars, they weren't connected in the front at all. They would attach at the spring perch, kind of in the center of the spring, and then they would be just dangling in the front. And with the idea being when you stomped on the gas, the bar would come up and slap the bottom of the spring. They call them slapper bars, but they weren't connected at all in the front. On my '77 Mustang, I had a set of what were called lift bars. They also did connect rigidly in the front. They didn't have a clamp like or a bracket like this. They just clamped directly onto the leaf spring, and they were rigidly mounted. And the cool thing about that type of a design is you can actually tune it. The way it worked with the lift bars was you put them on the car even on both sides, and then you go out there and you do a burnout. And if the car kicks left or right, whichever direction it kicks out on you, you shim that side. It came with a bunch of shims, and you'd put one shim in it and go do it again. And you would keep doing that until when you released from a burnout, the car went in a straight line, and which is what you want it to do. You don't want it to kick one way or the other. These are similar in that respect, in that this forward bracket here attaches at the same point as this bracket does. So from the subframe connector forward end, this box type structure attaches to that same forward spring perch, and there's a hole right here where my finger is. That's actually where the forward eyelet for the leaf spring is, and the leaf spring comes back. This replaces the lower spring perch. The U-bolts go directly through here. On the factory setup, this is a stamped steel part, and it gets replaced with a 1/4-inch plate steel, so a lot more rigidity there. Replaces the lower spring or shock mount as well. And then it has this bar that connects the two, and the bar has heim joints on either end, so it's fully adjustable. So you'll do the same thing with these. You go out there and you do a burnout and release the brake, and if the car kicks left or right, you adjust the rod until on one side or both, until you get it to where when you release the brake, the car goes in a straight line, which is exactly what you want. So these are easy to get bolt-on pieces. Stumpy's Fabworks makes the subframe connectors and the traction bars. The rear sway bar, I'm not sure where I got that. I'll put links to this stuff in the description. I also don't remember where I got the leaf springs. It was last year when I bought this stuff. And then, of course, new bushings for everything. The leaf springs come with new bushings at the forward end. At the aft end, they have a traditional shackle setup, and so I've got new bushings for the rear eye for both springs, and then new shackles and upper bushings where the shackle's attached to the car. And then polyurethane bushings that attach the sway bar to the lower plates on the traction bars, and then polyurethane bushings for the lower and the upper end of the rear shocks. So all bolt-on stuff, easy to do. You don't have to do any welding if you don't want to. Welding the front end of the subframe connectors is optional. Like I said, it has 3 bolt holes in each of these that you can just drill through and bolt it on if you want. So really easy upgrade that makes a dramatic difference in how a Mustang II handles and performs, particularly in cornering. You'll notice on the stock setup there is a lot of body roll, even at relatively low speeds. This eliminates all of that. The other thing is with without the subframe connectors, if you put any amount of horsepower at all, and I'm talking like 300 or more, when you really jump on it and lay the power to it, you can feel the car twist. You can feel the floor twist. It's kind of a creepy feeling, actually. But when you put the subframe connectors on, especially if you put those on in combination with a good quality traction bar, you'll feel, instead of the car twisting, the whole car will sort of pick up when you launch it. And that's what should happen. The rear end tries to load the car, and the car should have, you know, an opposite reaction. When the tires rotate forward, the rear end should want to turn up, and when it tries to turn up, it should have to pick up the whole car and push the whole car forward instead of twisting the car. You want it to sort of pick up, and as it does that, plant the tires to the ground. And so it's a difference that you can physically feel from the driver's seat in how the car flexes or doesn't once you put these pieces on.